What is going on, everybody? It is Sam Lattof here from the Average Fan Podcast. We are back, episode 2. It was not one and done. Me and Oliver, we decided that we are coming back, and I mean, what an interesting time to come back, Oliver. Obviously, the season is right around the corner. We still don't know if there will be any games played. Lots to talk about in terms of the CBA. But if games are going to be played, we'll touch on the opener with Sporting Jacks, as well as touch on the Birmingham Legion game. But Oliver, how you doing, man?
I mean, other than the fact that we still don't have, a labor agreement in the USL Championship, and as I was talking about with Thomas Pinzone, we're bombing the shit out of Iran and all the rest of that. I'm doing great outside of everything that's wrong in the world.
I mean, I can't wait for Spain not to show up to the World Cup. I can't wait for Foxborough to not get money from FIFA. So it's gonna be great. Hey, if you're down in Connecticut, maybe we get the FIFA World Cup games down at the Ren. So that could
I,
work out.
I'm
All
sure Dillon
integral
Stadium will
things
be
working out.
available. 5,500 seats. I'm sure that's the only amount of fans. We can sell those tickets.
Hey, I mean the prices, you'll still make your money back. So.
That's right. So,
But we got way more important things to talk about compared to a FIFA World Cup that costs millions of dollars to go to and $300 to park. We got to talk about the CBA negotiations between the USLPA and the USL. Big news, I would say. Oliver kind of touched upon it on his appearance with the Blazing Musket podcast. But today today, Wednesday, we had the USL Championship come out with a pretty bold statement. Definitely basically saying and portraying that they've been doing their best to to an agreement. Basically saying that they've come down to large increases in, whether it's payment or other areas. And there's really just two sticking points: health insurance as well as name and image likeness. For the health insurance, basically just seems like the two sides want to go two different ways about it. And name and image likeness definitely seems like there's no room, there's no progress being made in those negotiations from where what the PA wants, and what the USL Championship wants. The PA came out with their own statement, essentially kind of debunking, from their point of view, what the championship said. But Oliver, we'd love to kind of first get your reaction to what the championship came out with. Definitely seemed very, I don't know if heavy handed is the right word, but there was definitely some stuff in there that was interesting to read.
yeah. Well, it made me think of when I was on here with you and Matt Anderkin last fall, and we talked about how well set up the USL as a entity was for kind of a protracted labor fight, right? This was right in the aftermath of the championship game, where the players had worn their shirts on the pitch, pro union, right, shirts, and then allegedly the league canceled the on-field trophy presentation on account of this, right? Allegedly. And my take at the time was that suggested to me that the league was not in a long-term thinking headspace around any of this, right? They were reactive. And this again felt a little bit reactive to come out with a statement that essentially said, our league is second rate. So the players don't deserve what they're asking for because we're not a top tier league. We're not that good. And now you're going to turn around over the next 24 months and say, well, we're D1. We're going to do Pro Rel. We're a legitimate alternative, if not a direct competitor to Major League Soccer. ESPN, give us a bunch of money to air these games. Fans, your season ticket prices are going up. Whatever, all these things. It feels so short-sighted to have put in writing in that way a statement that says, we're only second rate, basically. Our players aren't that good. Even if you internally believe that the players are second rate, that you're not there yet, why would you say that in this context, except to try and get the short-term win in this round of negotiations, this round of bargaining? And look, employers do this all the time. If you've ever been in an environment where you've been part of a negotiating committee from a union perspective, or you've just been in a bargaining unit where other people are doing the negotiating, employers say what to my mind is dumb shit like this all the time that gets them in trouble further down the line because they were trying to get the win today and not thinking about the bigger picture, not thinking about the longer term. And so it feels really short-sighted for the championship, for the league to come out and say something to that effect. But it's not surprising. It feels utterly predictable that they would be so focused on trying to get the win in negotiating, the win in bargaining here, or what they perceive as a win, that they wouldn't be thinking about the bigger picture, because it also just tracks with everything they've done along the way that's brought us to this point. Now, the other thing I'll say is we knew that there was a mediation session scheduled for Wednesday, the day we're recording this, and it doesn't appear that that went well, based on the fact that we've got these statements, competing statements coming out that don't sound conciliatory, that don't sound like anybody is saying we're so close, we're so excited about the work we're doing with our partners, blah, 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 all those things, all those noises that people make when they're trying not to upset anyone because there's a very delicate balance about to be struck. So again, we could all wake up by the time this podcast drops on Thursday and there's a strike been announced. I mean, that seems utterly plausible to me.
And that's why, Oliver, I'm not going to release it on Thursday. I'm going to release it as soon as we're done, so that can't happen. Or it could happen. We could get to tonight, and there would be a strike announced. But like you were mentioning, the fact that I want to read their statement, I'll give them credit, make sure that we're not quoting them incorrectly, but they say that for the commercial, name, image, and likeness, the USLPA has publicly compared its requests to the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League, but that is not a direct comparison. The PWHL is at the pinnacle of its sport with a high concentration of national team players, operates under centralized commercial rights, and despite having fewer teams, has over 50% more players with 10,000 followers. Love that we are now in an age where follower count is being used in labor negotiations. But essentially, that's what it's saying is our players, like you said, our players are not that good. Our marketing teams aren't that good because they somehow can't market their players. So it really just seems like an indictment on itself, almost like telling on yourself. So
Well,
that's
and
the
I'll be honest, these are things you might say in negotiations, right? Like if you're trying to make the point to the Players Association and say this is why we're going to offer you this, it's because we see ourselves in comparison to, we don't agree with the comparison you've made to this other league. Here's why. And this is why our offer is different. And that might not be a fun moment at the negotiating table between everyone, but you might say it in that context. To come out publicly and just like do what feels like shitting all over the players in public does not inspire confidence in the league's approach. It does not feel good as a fan. It doesn't feel good as a guy who interviews these players, 60 times a year, talks to them and knows how much they put into it, knows how talented some of them are. And yeah, like, sure, are there a high concentration of national team players in the USL Championship? Absolutely not. Do you say that when you're going to want to turn around and sell yourself as a D1 league with promotion and relegation and as a legitimate, alternative to MLS and American soccer? Absolutely. What are we doing here?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because, in the USL Discord, and I was watching Morning Kick Around today. It sort of seemed like, the USL's kind of goal of this is the shift, blame, shift kind of overall sentiment. And, there was sort of that, when USL comes out with these numbers kind of portraying how much the increases are. But I think, when you look at something like healthcare, again, it's crazy that we live in a world where that is being negotiated, for sports labor negotiations. But, the big sticking point seems to be USLPA wants kind of like one standard, something that comes from the league. And the league says, well, we don't think we can do that because we have all these teams. They operate by themselves, even though they operate under the USL. And, they have to give out their own individual plans. And I mean, it seems like a little bit of you guys are both going for the same thing where we just want to argue about which way to get. But I mean, the fact that, I was looking on the USLPA's Instagram and there was stuff about, you know, MRIs and imaging being done when it's too late and, trainers feeling pressured by coaches to essentially push these guys back into play. And I mean, the fact that, there's always, when it comes to sports, the fact that, oh, you get to play sports for a living, you have it great. Why would you be complaining? And I mean, especially in the USL Championship, these players are not making millions of dollars. And I think, me and you can agree, Oliver, they deserve health insurance. Like, I think one of the, requests that I'm seeing over here on the USL Players Association Instagram, when it comes to housing, They just want them to have 100 square feet of, like, livable space. It's not asking, for a whole lot. Like, in morning kick around, someone's like, "Oh, yeah, I'd live with, like, 3 or 4 guys just to be able to play professional sports," and I'm like, "You might say that, but, once that situation happens, definitely things might change." But, as we
Yeah.
are a few days away, Oliver, do you think that we actually see Hartford Athletic play, or do you think, based on how things went today, Wednesday, that we could see a strike?
Well, yeah, I mean, I said this the other day with Thomas. I think the likelihood is very high. This is a very dangerous moment if you're concerned about the season starting on time. Um, Now is one of probably the peak times for the players to actually go on strike, is when it's going to start affecting the bottom line. Opening weekend is obviously a very high profile moment to do it. You know, I think this is a moment. If they don't strike for this weekend, then we might not see it for a couple of weeks. We might not see it on the second weekend or the third weekend. Um, I mean, I don't know though, right? I'm not in the room. I'm not, there when they're thinking about whatever their considerations might be. Not every team is playing this weekend, so I can see them potentially wanting to, just as a matter of strategy and tactics, right? Wait until you're really going to hit as many teams as possible with that lost gate revenue, with the financial impact of games being missed. Um, but opening weekend is kind of the time, in a lot of ways. Now, the tricky part of it is a lot of these teams have traveled already. Hartford, for example, have already flown to Florida. They're already in the Jacksonville area for their game on Saturday. And so if they go on strike, I guarantee you Hartford Athletic is not going to fly those guys home again. So there is a little bit of a potentially internal tactical question for the USLPA of, do we maybe wait until like Monday when potentially we don't have a bunch of guys who might be stranded in like Charlotte or something like that because the team said, well, you're on strike, can't get on the the team flight sort of situation. I don't know, and I don't really know enough about how some of those things are worked out. It may be like the tickets are already bought, the guys can fly. I don't know, but I can imagine situations where there might be a little bumpiness at this particular juncture. Um, but it feels like a really risky moment.
Definitely, definitely, and, like you mentioned, with not every team playing, if you wanna maybe, portray a unified front, maybe you will wait for a match day where, everyone is playing, so definitely will be interesting to keep an eye on. But looking kind of back towards the on-field product in terms of, what's going on there. Hartford did make a signing. They brought in Britton Fisher, defender, coming from MLS Next Pro. Oliver, you wrote about him for the Blazing Musket. Just overall, what do you think of this signing? What kind of role can he play? And just how does he kind of play a role in kind of Hartford's back line?
Well, he's desperately needed. So before they signed him, Hartford had three everyday center backs, right? They had Arturo Diz, Jordan Scarlett, and TJ Presses. And it sounds like, based on everything we've heard and seen, Brendan Burke intends to play a back three again this year. So you need all of those guys, right? You don't have a reserve. They do have Matt Rial and Babakar and Jai who can kind of tuck in a little bit, particularly at left center back in that three-back system. But they needed a body, if nothing else. They needed somebody as a rotational player in case there's an injury, all of that kind of stuff. So they had to get somebody in. And this is actually a path that Brendan Burke has gone down over the last couple of seasons. In 2024, it was Joey Apinono who came in as a loan to kind of give another little, a little bit more depth at center back. Last year, they ultimately brought in Josh Baluz on loan. So, like, it's an avenue that Brendan Burke clearly feels comfortable with, a loan and a relatively young, fairly untested player at a high level in that kind of rotational role if he has the physical qualities and Fisher certainly has the height, 6'4". He's the tallest outfield player on the team by like 3 inches or something like that. Like he's a pretty tall dude. um so Burke is clearly comfortable with not needing to go out and get an experienced veteran to kind of fill in that rotational piece. Obviously, given everything we've also heard over the years about Hartford's budget situation, it makes sense to bring in a loan as opposed to going out and getting a veteran who might, you know, even a mid-range veteran might be commanding $50, $60, $70,000 that Hartford doesn't really want to spend on a rotational center back. So it makes sense. Uh, he will certainly see the pitch. He'll need to. This isn't a guy who's just going to be around in training and warming the bench. You also have two center backs in Jordan Scarlett and Arturo Diaz who are on the wrong side of 30. Both have a little bit of an injury history. Diaz also has a history of getting sent off. So I fully expect him to be on the pitch for meaningful minutes this season. I also wouldn't be surprised if Hartford made another move kind of in during the season to bring in another body along the back line. But important role player, will play some minutes, appears on, limited review of available tape and, me guessing that he'll be fine. I don't really, this feels fine. He's not going to play 2,500 minutes probably, but he's going to be there. I wouldn't be surprised if he played like 1,000, 1,200 minutes in a rotational role if he's around all season, and is really really needed.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's kind of interesting looking at Minnesota United and Minnesota United too. They definitely seem invested in kind of the USL Championship, maybe USL system. Obviously, you had Mamadou Dieng go up there, but you also had Jordan Adebayo-Smith go to Detroit City. I believe they signed one of the Markinich brothers, and they've really made a lot of transactions between USL Championship and Minnesota United. So definitely, always interesting to see, who's invested in USL Championship, and especially if you can get a young player consistent minutes, against actual adults compared to down in MLS Next Pro, where it's essentially more academy than a reserve side, just because of the ages of who's playing. So definitely would be valuable experience. So it's going to be interesting to see how he plays out. I mean, happy birthday, Arturo Dispe. His birthday today. So
That's right. That's right. He was.
now he's even more on the wrong side of 30. So
He sure
congratulations.
is. Which congratulations to him. I hope this is a good season for him at that age.
Exactly, exactly. But speaking of the season, let's get into it. Season opener against Sporting Jacks, their first ever game. They already have great plans for a stadium. I believe it features muffins, allegedly. Really interested to see how that turns out. But yeah, overall, again, first season coached by Liam Fox. Lots of Scottish experience. I don't believe he has any real USL experience. But I guess we'll start there with the manager. Overall thoughts on Liam Fox and, overall what we could expect from the Sporting Jack side.
Yeah. So Liam Fox has been around in Scotland in I think all three tiers, maybe, or all three of their upper tiers, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years now since his playing career ended. It's not been particularly successful. He's had two spells as the top guy. In both of those seasons, he was fired with his club at the bottom of the table. Once, I think it was in the Scottish second tier, and the other time, I believe it was with Dundee, who I think were playing in the Premiership at the time. Don't quote me on that; I might be wrong. But in either case, like, he didn't make it through a full season. He won, I think, 6 of 30 games in his first spell as the top guy, and 7 of 25 in his sort of 7 of 28, something like that, in his second spell. And those are not good numbers. And it's not good when you don't make it through a full season because you're getting fired because your team is about to be relegated. So the big question, I think, was that he didn't have the time to build out his own roster? The patience, the leash on managers in Scotland is not any longer than it is in England. It can be very, very short. There's not a lot of patience. You're expected to come in. You're expected to win with the guys who are there, make a couple of key moves, and put your team in contention. And if it doesn't happen, you're not going to be given a second season, right? You're maybe not even going to be given that full first season. So it may not be fully a reflection on Liam Fox that, as a manager, I don't really know what kind of pieces he had. I think with Cloudenbeath is the first team he was with, and then with Dundee. I don't really know how much input he had into building those rosters and how much of a chance of success he ever really had with either of those teams. But the fact of the matter is, he didn't win many games. And I think if you're a Sporting Jacks fan, you probably are a little bit nervous about the idea that your inaugural manager has not had a lot of success on the pitch. Now, in terms of what they're going to do, we actually have a little bit of insight because one of their preseason games against Charleston Battery was live streamed, which frankly I think all the USL Championship teams do, but they mostly don't. And in this case, their approach seems to be one where you could have some success in this league. It appears to be very direct. They've built a roster that has quite a bit of speed. It's going to depend on speed and athleticism. They're going to put the ball over the top, and they're going to try and break you down by being faster than you, by beating you with those long balls. And like you can do that. This is a level of soccer where that can be successful. We're not in a level where you've got to be possession oriented and all these things, and everybody's fast, so you can't be faster than anybody else. So I mean, tactically it could work. I think particularly against a Hartford team that doesn't feel like it had a particularly successful preseason in terms of having everybody in training, in terms of just being able to pull all the pieces together in time for the start of the season. Historically a slow starting team under Brendan Burke. They could have some success on Saturday with that approach, and they certainly have pieces. They brought in guys like Edgardo Rito, who former Hartford Athletic player actually, who is very physically gifted, has over 100 appearances in the championship. Bunch of other guys on that roster who, Juan Kuzain, Wahab Akwe, especially in defense, guys who are really experienced in this particular league and know what it takes, with a really healthy mix of MLS Next Pro guys to kind of round things out and give you that youth and athleticism and all those things. So they put together a good roster, or a roster that feels like it can achieve the kind of tactical approach that they revealed in that preseason game. But it is kind of a big question mark over Liam Fox and whether or not he actually is going to be able to make the adjustments, fully, execute on the tactical approach he's identified. And who knows, right? They certainly feel like they're in a better place than the other league newcomers in Brooklyn FC, who had a player retire out from under them before they've ever played a game. But who knows?
Hey, you got to retire on top. And, if you are a part of a team that never lost the game, that's pretty impressive. So,
That's right, undefeated in Brooklyn. So.
Exactly. But, personally, just pure interest of me is I'm sort of a Harvey Neville stan in the fact that I just ironically love him. Um, Literally every time I'm in the press box, I have an inside joke with one of the writers where I say, "You know what this game needs? Harvey Neville." So very excited to see how he does. Mostly just so I can keep making these jokes, but in terms of going down to Florida, obviously for teams up in the Northeast, whether you look at it during kind of football season or you look at it with soccer, going down there early can be a little bit difficult, whether it's the humidity, adjusting to the warm weather. So it'll be interesting to see just, what the legs look like, especially like you mentioned, Hartford typically doesn't get off to a hot start, especially under Brendan Burke. So I guess looking ahead to the game, if Hartford is going to get off to a good start, we'll say take a point, potentially get three. What do you think is the crucial kind of aspect of the play that they kind of have to have on Saturday to go up against Spartan Jacks, get the 3 points? And then who do you think's a key player if they are going to win?
Yeah, so I think the thing we've talked about a couple of times is that Brendan Burke's approach is requires this level of connection and level of everybody being on the same page that is really difficult to achieve. We saw last season what happens when it could lock in, right? They played these games against like Loudoun, New Mexico United, Rhode Island, where they just blew them off the pitch because they were completely locked in. They were hitting every single press trigger, every single long ball or through ball was in the right place. The guys made the right runs, right, all of that stuff. If that's happening on Saturday, Hartford's going to win the Players' Shield, right? If that's happening on March 7th, no one's going to catch them all season, right? And I'm not being facetious. I mean that. I don't think that's where they are. So I think what I would personally be looking for from Hartford is some sense that they're further along than they were last season. It took them until June to really, really, really get this locked in. And some of that was guys were unavailable through injury. You had Samuel Cariaga missed a bunch of time early in last season. You had other players who were in and out of the lineup for a variety of reasons, like Kyle Edwards and Arturo Diz. I think even Michi Galina missed a couple of games in there. So if they're further along than they were in March last year, when they just really fizzled in early season games against Lexington and against Pittsburgh, where they just looked completely out of sorts in basically every aspect of the game, that will be a really encouraging sign. And what I'd be looking for particularly is to see that the guys who are back for their second or even third year in Hartford, that they look like they're up to speed, even if some of the new pieces maybe aren't quite there yet. So guys like Sebastian Anderson, Jordan Scarlett, Emmanuel Samadia, if he plays, which sounds like it's kind of up in the air at the moment, unclear. Mishi, Galina, right? These guys look like they're in the right place at the right time. They're hitting the press triggers. They're making the right passes, making the right runs. That will be encouraging, even if maybe some of the newer guys like Barry Coffey or Christos Hadjivaskalis, if those guys maybe aren't quite in the right place at the right time, that'll worry me less because you hope that kind of comes along. If it looks like these guys haven't played together before, that's going to be really worrying because you've got a lot of guys returning who did play a lot of minutes together last season. Now, in terms of who needs to look good, um, with the likelihood or the possibility that Emmanuel Samadia misses the game, I think Sebastian Anderson is one of the keys. The wing play for Hartford last season was incredible. You could honestly have made the argument that both Samadia and Anderson deserve to be first-team all-league selections. There was not a more creative attacking pair of fullbacks or wingbacks in the league than the pair of them. And so I don't really see why that's going to change. Certainly, they brought in some midfield reinforcements, but this is a team that wants to get out wide. It wants to use some speed and athleticism of its own to progress the ball up the pitch and attack kind of around the outside rather than through the middle. And so, with the likelihood that that's going to kind of be on the right-hand side with Anderson, he is probably going to be a really key player on Saturday to see what's going on that particular side of the pitch. Later in the season, with Samadia fully available, I would expect more of the attack to go down the left. But Matt Real, who is probably likely to start on the left-hand side, is not as dynamic an attacking player as Samadia or even as Babacar and Jai when he's healthy. So I would expect the attack to come down the right, and that means Sebastian Anderson has to come up big in this game. And he has come up big in games last season, right? He's not a guy who is, I think, averse to the challenge. He's at an age for a fullback where he's probably in his peak years of his career. This could very well be one of his best years, just thinking about his age and thinking about what he showed last season. So big things could be coming from him. And I think he needs to show up big on Saturday.
Definitely, definitely will be interesting to see again, hopefully, if they play. And then looking ahead, obviously, Hartford will then go play Birmingham Legion, as we like to call them up here. Rev South head coach Jay Heaps, who decided, hey, why do I need to hire someone when I can just hire myself? And in terms of players to watch, again, more of a personal one, Gavort Diarbian leaving the Revolution organization, headed down to Birmingham Legion. A real quick winger, very skilled on the wing, so definitely keep an eye on him. Overall, Oliver, what are your impressions of the Legion this season, coming off, a really poor 2025?
Yeah, well, so Legion are in a weird spot, right? Because they hired Mark Briggs. They fired former manager Thompson, right, who was formerly also of that Revs tree, and brought in Mark Briggs like really early last year. I think in like April, maybe I forget. And that seemed like a really good hire at the time. Mark Briggs was probably one of, if not the best available manager in terms of USL Championship experience for a team wanting to make a midseason switch. Didn't really produce results. They missed the playoffs. Briggs couldn't get it really turned around. I think everybody was kind of excited to see what he was going to maybe do with a full offseason to reshape the team. He had a lot of success in Sacramento. Could he kind of replicate that here? Well, and then he leaves, right? Really, really late in the day. And that, I think, part is why we end up with the manager situation that we did, right? Because you got to have you're going to bring in somebody off the street who didn't assemble this roster, maybe isn't excited about these pieces. That can be really risky when you're talking about like making that move in January as training camp is about to open. So probably, jokes aside, the best move the club could have made was for Heaps to step into that role. But it doesn't make it any less funny, right? When you run a search that ends up hiring yourself. Um, Honestly, I'm not sure Birmingham did enough to improve over the offseason. They didn't really add a ton of pieces. They brought in Romario Williams, who's like not had a great season in a couple of years, and he's going to turn 32. They still have Ronaldo Damas, who I have to strongly suspect, if they have another weak start to the season, is a really likely candidate to be moved on. Someone is going to want him and his ability to produce in key moments. And a lot of the other pieces they have just don't feel particularly exciting. And I'm not really sure that they're well set up to have success this year. They have a really difficult stadium situation, which is not ideal. They're definitely a club where I think the fans every season worry a little bit that maybe this is the year that they decide to shut things down. It doesn't really sound like it's ever got quite as close as that, although the anxiety is there. There's never been this like will they, won't they moment, but certainly people worry about it. They need to find a better situation in terms of where to play their games. Protective is not a good place for soccer at all. The atmosphere is terrible, and it's just not fun. Um, and the team, I'm not sure, is very good, honestly, all things considered. Now, it's the early season, right? Like, it's going to be a month of slop for all of these teams in the league, with the exception of, like, maybe Louisville City, right? Maybe Lexington, given the quality of the players they brought together. Um, so who knows, right? Hartford could go into these two games. They could get 6 points very easily without playing particularly well, because that's the nature of soccer in, March in the USL Championship. They could also get completely blown out in both of these games, and it also not mean anything about where this team is for the rest of the season, because again, it's March. So I don't think Birmingham is particularly good. Um, I also think Hartford is in a rough position playing 2 road games to start the season in 4 days, 5 days, whatever it is. That's really terrible. And again, like we're back to an indictment of the league.
Yeah, it seems like the league really loves giving Hartford great schedules, whether it's just like ending a season on a never ending road trip or what have you. Definitely make it, get it out of the way early. But definitely it'll be interesting. Seems like it could be something to potentially build off of. If Sporting Jack's game maybe doesn't go as planned, kind of a rebound game there. Obviously, you still have to deal with the quick turnaround, but don't know. Obviously, with your overall sentiment, is there any player that kind of stands out? Is it Ronaldo? Who kind of stands out as someone that Hartford fans should keep an eye on when that matchup comes?
Well, I think you have to keep an eye on Ronaldo Damas, right? He's never been a super high volume goal scorer. He's just that guy who he always seems to pop up with a goal when you need one. He's particularly lethal in the playoffs. He's been a major contributor in multiple teams in playoff runs in this league. And I was actually very surprised that a playoff team last year, when Birmingham was eliminated, didn't come calling and make a real Godfather offer for him. And say if he feels like a player who could have bought somebody a championship if you'd been willing to come in with the right amount of money, which for a USL Championship probably would have been like $120,000, something like that. Which, okay, that's a lot of money, but I was surprised that he didn't move at the tail end of last season. And so he's a player you have to watch, because he can score a goal from situation, like from not from nowhere. It's not that kind of like magic that he creates, but it just feels like he's there with a goal when it matters. And so you have to watch him. You have to pay attention to him. The other thing I would say uh, about Birmingham is they've got a new goalkeeper situation, right? Matt Van Okel had been there, no longer in the net, and I don't really know if they've decided on their number one. But that's a huge change when you go from that kind of consistency. Van Ogle had been around in this league for a very long time, was a very reliable pair of hands. And so I think one thing you may want to pay attention to if you're a Hartford fan is, what do things look like at the back there? Because if it's at all shaky, Hartford does have the firepower, does have the players who can punish a shaky defense. If you're sloppy getting the ball out, if passes are to nobody, if your distribution is poor, guys like Galina, Obalola, they're going to pounce on that. And so that could be an area to keep an eye on as
Got you, got you. And now I think we should get to a little quick hits we got a few things that I want to run Oliver's way. We'll start off jersey talk. Hartford released a new jersey. Would love your thoughts on it, Oliver. Personally, pretty big fan. Very clean. Very, has a nice design to it. Overall, like I feel like it's something that you could just like wear anywhere. It's not too like out there in terms of colors. But what was your thoughts on Hartford's new jersey?
I like the jersey. I think it's a very. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of very simple, clean away jerseys. I don't love when teams try to do something really fancy with their away jersey. It just go base white with a limited color accent. It makes everything easy for everybody, right? So I think it's a very simple, very clean jersey. The green, the kind of more sage green, is an interesting choice. Hartford's green has been typically a lot brighter. Their home jerseys, obviously, that they're wearing still are a much brighter green, much more vibrant green. So I'm interested to see if that's kind of a broader design decision that they're going to move forward with in the future with that kind of sage green color choice. But I will say, of all the away jerseys Hartford has had, probably my favorite. The one they've been wearing the last 2 seasons, the Constitution kit they're calling it, has been okay. But I would say this is probably their best away jersey. So, I like it. I wish they weren't charging $100 for it. That feels like a lot of money for a USL Championship jersey, but it is what it is.
Oliver, you say that, but USL League One clubs are charging $110. So we live in that world.
Are we talking Portland Hearts of Pine here?
Well, I'm actually talking more than Portland Hearts of Pine, which
Okay.
blows my mind. But
Because
Portland
honestly,
Hearts,
Portland Hearts of Pine could charge like $300 for the jerseys and people would buy them because like their fan base is rabid, which is great. That's not a criticism, but yeah.
I don't know, kind of sounds like a criticism, Oliver.
All right. Well, Sean will be on to complain about that, I'm sure.
Exactly. But you mentioned Portland. We should probably touch on it just a little bit, getting closer to the U.S. Open Cup. We already talked about it a little bit, but like essentially, Hartford should win this game, right?
Oh, against FC Motown? Yeah. I mean, this is the same thing last year, right? Hartford had New York Shockers in the opening round, and they outshot them something obscene. I think the expected XG for New York Shockers was like 0.01 or something like that, right? Like, they just didn't manufacture anything. I expect something very similar from FC Motown because they're in exactly the same situation that amateur clubs always are in the Open Cup, which is that they don't have a squad. They're not playing. The best they can hope for is to try and bring back a bunch of guys who played for them last season, who at least have some understanding of what they're doing together, and maybe they can, put something together. But it just isn't a good situation. The way the cup is structured relative to the seasons for these amateur clubs in USL2 and so on. So yeah, I mean, if Hartford doesn't win this game, we're going to be doing an emergency podcast from my hotel room in Newark because I'm going down for the game and I'm staying, and I will have thoughts about it for sure if Hartford loses. But if they win, we're not going to learn anything, right? Because of the nature of the game. So it's definitely one of those situations where you have to go, you have to play it, you have to win, and I really don't think Brendan Burke is going to learn anything about his players from that game.
I mean, at least he will learn that they can shoot a ball on target and that, it probably might not even be Anthony Saha, but someone other than Anthony Saha can save shots. So there's at least that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I think too is that I do think Hartford wants to advance in this competition, right? Last season, the loss to Portland Hearts of Pine was really disappointing. Disappointing to fans, but I think the players and I think Brendan Burke were extremely disappointed with that result. They were really hoping to make noise in that competition, to make a run, to get a shot at an MLS team, and they didn't. And so I do think this is a situation where we're going to see probably a strong side, also because the squad isn't that deep. It's not like there's a ton of guys to rotate. But I do think Hartford is looking at this competition this year. They want to make a run. They don't want to bow out early. And so, if nothing else, we'll probably see a strong side in Newark in 2 weeks' time.
I'm just begging for another Hartford Athletic versus New England Revolution Open Cup game. That is one of my fondest memories of the Open Cup. Being up for Vermont Green's win over Lexington probably is at top, but second is seeing the Hartford fans and their amazing signs at Gillette Stadium. So,
About the only fans in the stadium for that game. There were like no Revs fans there, and that's
I
not
mean,
fair.
it was essentially, yeah. I think they outnumbered Revs fans because again, who wants to go to a freezing cold, cavernous Gillette Stadium. But hey, once ever comes, we're all good, so don't worry. But Oliver, one more thing. I can't let you get off the podcast without this. Connecticut United play a game,
Connecticut
and
United played a game, and they won, and they looked good doing it. Like, they dominated that game, right? Like let's be honest, right? They won 3-1. They were fully deserved winners of that game, and I think it tells us, I think, two things. One, that the business side of soccer is totally separate from the playing soccer side of soccer, right? Which we all know, but occasionally have to be reminded of, right? That whatever the delusional dreams of bringing MLS to Bridgeport, Connecticut are, whatever dreams they might have, the ownership might have of getting the state to fund a soccer stadium, those do not impact the ability to put a quality product on the field, right? Which it appears they have been able to do. And certainly you were saying very early on, like, hey, these are some guys. Like, this is not just like we signed a couple of teenagers. Like, they put together a reasonably attractive roster, right? Like, this could be good. And from all reports, the kind of academy products that they've been putting together have also been successful and look good. So it does appear that on the soccer side of things, all of this is going just fine. They still haven't announced where they're going to play their home games. And I just want to underline that they've been accepting season ticket deposits for a long period of time now and have still not communicated, unless they've communicated to those people who put down their deposits, which I will say I was not one, so maybe I'm not getting some secret emails, but they still have not announced a location to play their home games. So I think there is this one thing that all of this tells us is whatever's going on that side of things, on the soccer, on the business operation side of things, they have put together a pretty good team for this league. Now, the second thing this tells us is that if you are willing to put together a decent team in MLS Next Pro, you should be winning all of your games because you're going to play against a bunch of teenagers. And they might be extremely talented teenagers, and they might go on to great careers, but for right now, they're 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. And if you're willing to bring in a professional group of players and put in the work, independent clubs should dominate that league. And that, I think, is actually kind of the bigger problem facing MLS Next Pro over the next few seasons as they bring in more independent clubs, is that if it just turns into 5 or 6 independent clubs dominating the league because the only real competition they have is each other, that's going to make for a lot of really boring soccer and that's not going to attract a lot of eyeballs to the product. And at some point, those independent clubs are going to say, well, it's been great to dominate MLS Next Pro, but maybe if we really want to have a business, we should jump somewhere else. We should go to the USL, right? Whether that's League One or the Championship or whatever. So I think what it showed us, and this one game wasn't even close. This wasn't like they scraped out a win. They completely dominated Cincinnati 2, right? From start to finish, all game long. Cincinnati wasn't even in the game at all at any moment. I don't know that says anything good about that league. It's great for CT United. I'm still not convinced they're going to be around in 2027 if they can't figure out where they're going to play games. But it doesn't say much that's good about MLS Next Pro. So I look forward to more great results from CT United, and then I hope that they jump to USL League One next year, and that we have something in-state there, rather than trying to play in what is essentially a kiddie league.
Now, see, you could go the route, the New York Football Giants and the New York Jets. We could just have them go up to the USL Championship. You guys share Trinity Health. Like, why not?
I will say that would make for the most amazing content. I would quit my job. I would take a leave of absence from my job for a year to cover that if that happened. It would be incredible. Can you imagine, like, how insane that would be? I would love every second of it, getting to cover something like that. I do think that the thing with CT United that kind of drives me crazy is that, like, there are so many markets that really truly want a club. And there are fans out there who want their own club to cheer for. And maybe even in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And what we've instead got is what feels like a real estate development scam with a club attached to it. And you could say that, honestly, sure. You could say that about a lot of USL clubs as well. Sporting Jacksonville, right? Like, not clear that they're also not a real estate scam, right? With a club attached at this point. it drives me crazy that that's the business model of USL Championship, of USL League One, of independent clubs going into MLS Next Pro. It drives me crazy that that's the business model of MLS, where it feels like the sport is secondary to owning some real estate. I understand why it is that way. I get it. I understand that people are still skittish about the idea that a soccer club can be a viable business proposition and that owning one can be profitable. I get it. But the fact that we have what appears to be a competent soccer operation in Bridgeport for CT United attached to what frankly feels like a clown shoes, front office operation that has also contracting out all of its marketing to a third party vendor. Like, what are we doing, guys? Come on.
And I'm just going to give a quick, I'm not a PR professional. If you have a media availability at 1 p.m., maybe give more than an hour just notice.
It certainly gives the impression that you didn't actually want anybody to show up for it.
That's for the visual listeners right there. But Oliver, you could go on Kalshi. You can go predict if CT United will be here in 2027. But for now, they're just gonna win MLS Next Pro and just prove all the haters wrong.
I will say, we'll look really stupid if they don't win another game this season. But
They're gonna win. They're gonna be good. They're going.
I have confidence watching them play on Saturday or Sunday afternoon. Excuse me. I have a lot of confidence that this is going to be a good team in that league. Now, that's not saying a ton, right? Given the nature of that league, but no, they're well set up to be successful on the pitch.
Definitely. But really appreciate all the average fans out there. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I was a little bit shocked about the numbers. I'm lucky I can see kind of all the podcast numbers for the Blazing Musket podcast, and look at how it stacked up. It definitely made me feel good. So shout out to all the Hartford fans out there. We really do appreciate you. Oliver, before we sign off, I do just want to give you the opportunity. What are you working on as we near the start of the regular season? Again, pending that there isn't a strike.
So I promised Sam that we'd have a season preview for Hartford Athletic in writing, for the old school folks who want to read it rather than listen to it. So that should be forthcoming tomorrow. And I'm also going to be talking with Brendan Burke a little bit ahead of the season. So we'll have a little bit more preview of his kind of expectations and a preview of the Sporting Jacksonville game between now and Saturday, assuming we don't have to just stick all that back in the can because there's a strike.
Yeah, that it would be amazing if you're on the phone with Brendan Burke and I just text you hey, it's a strike, and
well,
I'll get. Hey, didn't you hear about this?
That's right. I'll get Brendan Burke's immediate reaction in that case.
But no, I really appreciate everyone who listens. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to us, whether it's on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, really do appreciate the support. Make sure to check out Oliver's work on the Blazing Musket. Because there's a potential work stoppage, we're going to keep the 2-week cadence. So I believe we'll come back, either the day of or maybe we can go the day after the U.S. Open Cup match. But once again, really appreciate everyone for listening. Hope you are doing well. And once again, shout out to all the average fans.
Shout out the average fan.